Medical professionals of Reddit, what's the funniest thing a patient has said under anesthesia? The most memorable funny one was a guy who sat bolt upright, mime rolling a cigarette and tuck it behind his ear, saving it for on. When I asked what he was doing, anesthesia can be a wild trip. The kids will always scream when they wake up. I woke up from my hysterectomy screaming in pain and begging them to make it stop. The nurse was freaked out. She was desperately trying to get meds into my fourth as fast as she could, only for me to have a hives response all over my face. I must be a kid at heart, lol. In preparing to salsa dance, stand back everybody. There's nothing you can do to stop me. Somebody stop me. Young girl after a root canal said, where are my dentures? This woman undergoing C-section under spinal anesthesia plus ketamine said, show my baby first to my brother-in-law. He deserves to see her first. I sometimes wonder what happened to her marriage after that. I gave a kid methoxyflurane after he broke his arm. When we got to the hospital, he went into the pediatric section of the ED and there were stickers on the wall of Sesame Street characters. He started talking about this unicorn on the wall. There wasn't one, and how it was trying to be friends with Elmo, but Elmo didn't want to be friends with him. His mum and I had a chuckle, and I had to pry the whistle out of his hands. I'm a consultant anesthetist, UK, and there are loads. Often declarations of love from the patient as the drugs are kicking in. My all-time favorite is a 40-something guy a few years ago. He needed a testicle removing for cancer. He'd never had an anesthetic before and was super nervous, to the point of barely saying anything to anyone. As the drugs started to kick in, we realized someone was quietly singing. It was the patient. Hitler has only got one ball, apostrophe. Dislocated my shoulder in a way that my arm ended up stuck up over my head. Apparently, while all hopped up on Demerol, I was laughing hysterically while the doctor was standing on the table/gurney wrestling with my arm to get it back into the socket. I don't remember a thing. Lucky you. When I was 11, the doc wrestled with my broken shin and they gave me nothing but paracetamol. Most of those doctors must be sadists. I mean, why else would they choose a job like this? Not a medical professional, but my mom was coming out from under anesthesia after a procedure a few years ago, and I was trying to help her. She puckered her lips, so I picked up her water cup and asked if she wanted some. She turned her face toward me and said, "Do I look like an airplane?" Exclamation mark. Apostrophe. The nurses and I completely lost it. I still tease her about it sometimes. Well, some people do wanna turn into airplanes. What a weird fetish. I had double jaw surgery to correct my underbite. I took sign language in college. They typically don't wire your jaw shut anymore. They just use strong rubber bands. But you can still talk. I knew I'd be able to talk. Yet when I woke up from the surgery, apparently I kept trying to sign. The nurses were like, "UHH, we don't know sign language, honey." Based on how little I remember from college, I'm certain it wasn't even good sign language. Am I in hell? I was a patient after coming out of surgery for a hernia at the age of about 15 to 16. My father helped me to the bathroom in the hospital. I was pretty ducked up still and said, "Boy, Dad, I was just so worried I was going to get an erection during the procedure." He laughed and made a slicing motion with his hand, implying the doctor would have cut my dick off, and I burst into tears and threw up on myself. Not anesthesia but delirium. Introduced the oncoming nurse to the patient. The patient gestured grandly around the room and said, "Nurse's name. Meet all my friends." Exclamation mark. To an empty room. That could have been a joke about their lack of friends. My dad, Italian, was waking up from anesthesia and kept looking at his Asian nurse and saying he was so glad his daughter was with him and that he loved his daughter. The nurses were confused, so they went out into the waiting to check for his daughter. I was the only one in the waiting area, and when they saw me and started hysterically laughing, I'm Korean by birth, but was adopted by my lovely Italian family. Oh, this is cute. He was probably so relieved to wake up and see you. The very first time I was under, I was in 3rd grade and was relatively scared. What kept me brave was the promise of Burger King breakfast afterwards. It was an early morning procedure that required fasting, and I rarely got fast food. They ended up running behind that day, so it was up in the air if I would wake up and get out in time to get my breakfast, which ended at 10. The first words out of my mouth were, "What time is it?" When my mom informed me it was already about 9:30, I tried to get out of bed and nearly ripped out my fourth in the process. When she tried to tell me that we would be late and I could get it another day, I promptly burst into tears. Edit: I did get my Burger King a different day. Thank you all for your concern. I was a patient, but right before Christmas a couple of years ago I had my gallbladder removed. In the recovery room as I was waking up I became obsessed with singing the 12 Days of Christmas song. I kept asking the nurses what order the verses were in. As they were wheeling me out of the room I heard a nurse belt out 5 golden rings, which was followed by everyone's laughter. In the early days of my surgical training, there was a day that I was assigned to a colonoscopy list. Standard practice is to premedicate patients in the anesthetic bay if required, particularly if they are a bit anxious about the procedure. I was clerking one of the patients in the anesthetic bay, going through consent and the usual pre-op routine, when I noticed that she was giving me these weird sidelong glances and that her eyes would dart away every time I tried to make eye contact with her. She was also extremely fidgety and was stammering a lot in her responses to my questions. I kind of shrugged it off as pre-operative nervousness and let the anesthetist do his business. Fast forward 10 minutes and I'm standing behind her, she curled up into the fetal position with her ass hanging out and I, colonoscope in hand. As the propofol starts rushing through her veins, she turns right around, grips my forearm and stares up at me with a dreamy look on her face and goes, "You know what, doc? I bet you kill it with the ladies." Apostrophe. A moment later she was asleep and I was checking her colon for polyps. Woman woke up from surgery and said to her husband, "David, that alarm clock has a nose and it's running. Wipe it." A girl I worked with told the story of how she got grounded from age 15 to 18 because of anesthesia. She was having a colonoscopy, and as she was a minor her mother was in the room with her after she was sedated, and as the technician started to insert the scope, she mumbled, "No, not again. Boyfriend's name. It hurt last time." Apostrophe. Her mother was not amused. Not medic but patient. I had appendix surgery after a preventive 2-day fasting. Water was okay and anesthesia hit me pretty hard. When I was told I had to use one of those plastic urinals or whatever because they said the abdominal effort could make me faint, I just said, "I ain't gonna poop on a plastic tupper. If I pass out in the toilet like a hero, then let it be." Wife got an epidural right before childbirth and said some funny things. Once the baby's head was in the birth canal the nurses asked if she wanted to touch her baby, and she said that nobody is allowed to have sex with her daughter. LMAO, this reminds me of when I gave birth. The midwife said, "If you reach down now I'll be able to feel the baby." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Funnily enough I can feel her." My husband burst out laughing. Apparently the midwife's face was a picture, but I was too busy pushing out a human to notice. He still giggles about it, and our daughter's 5 now. It. OMG, I got an award. Thank you, kind Redditor. I was similar. The midwife said she had the baby's head, which just means they can see it crowning. I told her to get on and pull it out then, and also called her a lazy bitch for not helping whilst I was doing all the work. The crazy thing was, that midwife then came back 2 more times to deliver my other 2 babies, and each time, before I got onto the meds, she reminded me I was not to laugh and I was not to call her a lazy bitch. I sat straight up in the bed, they tell me, and shouted I didn't ask for this. Then I turned to a nurse and pleaded, "Okay, ma'am." Apostrophe. Oh god, I woke up sobbing. I was convinced that I was married to Cedric Diggory and he had just been killed by Voldemort. I'm cringing so hard just thinking about it. I was inconsolable. I always start to compliment everyone I see after waking up from anesthesia. It's super important to me to compliment them, it seems. You nurses are doing such a good job. I hope you know that. Such a great job. Apostrophe. Wow. You're all so beautiful. Why is everyone so beautiful? Exclamation mark. Apostrophe. Thank you for taking care of me. That's really nice of you. Apostrophe. I love your eyes. They look kind and pretty. Apostrophe. I'm not fully there yet, but I still always react the same. I'm scared and worried that they don't know how great they are. I have no filter when I wake up. Normally I'm too shy to say everything I think about others. And a few minutes later I start to throw up. Every single time. Obligatory, not a doctor, but I was a patient. I had to get my wisdom teeth removed at the hospital because they were, for lack of a better term, ducked. When I woke up, the nurse was going through the routine to make sure I was not brain dead. She asks me my name by saying, "Who are you?" I respond with, "I'm a lesbian." My parents were in the room. They didn't know at the time. That was how I came out. Damn. You really came out of anesthesia swinging the other way. But when my sister got her wisdom teeth out, she screamed in the car until we stopped and let her out near our house, and she sprinted back to the house because she wanted to race the car. I need to go find that video. After being put under to have a wisdom tooth extracted, I told everyone for an hour that my balls were tingling. I mean, they were. And folks just needed to know because it was hilarious. At least, to me it was so funny. We had to stop by the grocery store on the way home, and I think a few dozen people there heard about it. My poor wife. My husband was given ketamine as a sedative for a surgery he was having, but it tissued, meaning the drug was in his body but being slowly absorbed by the tissues rather than direct into the bloodstream. The medics tried again. It happens again. By the fourth attempt it works. He has really shitty veins. Cause renal failure will do that. He has his surgery, but in the meantime the rest of the doses are working their way into his system. The surgery finishes and has wheeled back into the ambulatory care ward where I'm waiting. He sees me and waves yelling, "Beckett. Beckett." Guess what? I'm on special K. The ward grinds to a halt for a second, and the staff are trying desperately not to start laughing. I just nodded and said, "Yeah, you are, aren't you?" Bonus points for the gentleman 2 beds over who I overheard asking his anesthesiologist if he could have what my husband had, please. He was so high, and the staff came and explained why and apologized to me. It was all good though. It did him no harm. When my brother was waking up after a surgery, my mother was there taking care of him, but he couldn't stop laughing. When he was finally able to squeeze out a few words, he said, "Mom. Ha ha ha. Mom, you're so ugly." Apostrophe. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.